Welcome to the Pitch2Purchase Podcast. I am your host, Lisa Raebel. This is a podcast where we talk about everything from the pitch, which is marketing, to the purchase, and then beyond. Because the client experience that you have is not just about sales. And that's our focus for this month, is sales role in the whole of every role touches revenue. Now you're probably saying, Lisa, sales, revenue. I mean, couldn't be more obvious than that. I'm going to go a little bit deeper than you think. Sales actually gets involved when it comes to the revenue aspect of building your business. So what I want you to understand is this. Most organizations believe that revenue is sales role and only sales role. Well, it's not. They might bring the prospects into the door and close the sales, but sales is really about every conversation, every decision, every handoff, every piece of communication you have throughout your entire team. Because I'm going to say it once, I'm going to say it 1,000 times. Every role in your organization touches revenue. Now, this is really apparent in one of my clients where they thought they had a content problem. Like, I don't think we're saying the things that we need to say to reach our audience. When what was happening is that the reasons that a lot of the sales were falling out of the funnel is that sales and marketing wasn't talking to a lot of the other parts of the organization, because there's a lot of handoffs in this organization. A lot of people who had to touch this client, not literally, of course. We don't want HR being called, but that had a role in closing this client. And so what happened was it was not a content problem. It was an internal communication problem. Every department was living and working in a silo. And then every department blamed the other department. Operations blamed shipping, and shipping blamed sales, and customer service blamed marketing. It was just like this whole mess. Once we designed the customer experience timeline of what actually happens, there's a lot of oh and ah moments. So yes, sales is responsible for bringing in customers and keeping customers, but it's not their only role to make sure that we have revenue. So one of the most common myths I hear all the time is that sales is the only department that actually sells. It's a huge myth. Everyone in an organization is selling something to somebody, because in leadership, they're selling their vision. In HR, they're selling culture. Customer service is selling confidence. And then operations is selling responsibility. Finance is selling trust. And project managers are selling the project. And your receptionist is selling first impressions. I could go on and on and on about this with all departments in your organization. But the reality is everybody is selling something. So when they understand their role in revenue, things operate a lot more smoothly. So let me go over the customer experience timeline real quick here. So let's say we have a line, right? We have a line here and a line here, these axes. And then in between, we're going to draw a straight line. And people think that this is the customer experience. It starts with the first time you connect with them, and it ends when the sale is over, or the project is over, or the product is delivered, whatever it is. What people don't realize, though, is before you even know a customer exists, depending upon the study you look at, anywhere between 50 and 70% of the buying decision is already made before they even contact a salesperson. That's marketing's job. And once a prospect is identified, then sales gets involved. But sales, a lot of times in most organizations, doesn't do it alone. If they need to quote a project, they got to get involved with either engineering or operations or systems or IT, or these other organizations have to put together the entire proposal to be able to present it back to the customer. And then once the customer signs on the bottom line, then you have a totally different thing where you have a handoff. The people are actually going to do the project. So once a sale is made, it is usually out of the salesperson's hands. Like, they keep the relationship, but it's other organizations or other departments' job to actually fulfill the sale. And if they don't, that also affects revenue. And then once a project is over or a product is delivered or a service is completed, there's an entire thing after this other access, after the sale. And that's the customer relationship. Now, that could go back to sales, that could be at the project manager, that could go to the president. Depends upon how your operation works. But in every single one of those steps, from identifying a prospect, marketing, doing the sales role and all the people that's involved there, fulfilling the sales, and then afterwards, that's a whole lot of people touching a client's client experience. And we don't think about it. We don't think about the handoff. And here's where it fails in the organizations that I see are having a problem with revenue, is that internal communications. They're not talking to each other. The onboarding and the handoffs that are happening are like a piece of paper in a folder. Here, figure this out. Okay, I'm just going to say it. That is so stupid. That is, why would a salesperson take something like this? I mean, there should be an entire process of what needs to happen, of communication process. And the people who are fulfilling the order need to be in on the process creation in the first place. And here's the part that gets me. Here's my WTF moment of the week. I was talking to a person who is a sales manager. And all he did, once he heard I did marketing, was bitch about his marketing department. Marketing doesn't do this, and they don't understand. And he was just whining about the whole thing. So I asked him, when's the last time you sat in a marketing meeting? And of course you heard the words that trigger me so badly. That's not my job. I maintained contourum. I did not throw my glass of wine in his face. I just said, really? Interesting. So how is marketing supposed to know what they're talking about out in the field, what your prospects need and your clients need, if you don't tell them? So we got in this whole discussion. I'm going to call it a lively conversation. And in the end, he's going, I see your point. So I'm not going to say I won, but if we were keeping score, I kind of won. I'm kind of not that person, but I was then in that conversation. So here's the point, is that if sales, who's out there listening to the customers and the prospects and what's going out there in the world, how is the marketing department, who usually lives inside four walls of your organization, supposed to understand what to create to connect with the audience? Here's the lesson. If you're in sales or you're in marketing, just talk to each other. Please, for the sake of all that's good for your customers, think of your customers. Think of the client experience. Play nice in the sandbox, please. I don't have a quote, like a famous quote for you this time in this episode, but I do have a concept that I want you to grasp. Revenue doesn't happen because departments work harder. Revenue happens when departments work together. So here's what I'm here to do. I spent 12 years in corporate sales, and I had beautiful marketing material that didn't say anything. Or I had beautiful marketing material that was all about the company that I worked for. I couldn't use it out in the field. And so what's happening is that when you create marketing, you create the marketing material, it's not about you. It's not about the company as much as it is about the client. And I do this when I do my pitch training. I talk about the story is yours, but the journey is theirs. So it's not about your story as it is about your customer's journey. I was literally doing this for my husband's website the other day. Great website. It's beautiful. It says all the things that his company does, but it didn't speak to the customer at all. It didn't tell them the opportunities that they had to work together. It didn't talk about the outcomes. It didn't talk about the problems that they solve. And so the question that I always propose to people who are developing their content is this. What statement can you give at the top, very top of your website? We're talking about websites only right here. Or actually, this would apply to social media as well. What statement, what 2 or 3 sentences, 1, 2, or 3 sentences are you going to put at the very, very top that wants to make them to keep scrolling? That's the question. Because that's what happens when you speak to the customer and you don't speak to your own, how you're wonderful and things like that. Because that conversation happens during the sales process, not in the lead generation and prospecting process. So your marketing material needs to be about them and less about you. I'm bringing this home because every role touches revenue. So doesn't your team need to understand how their role impacts the client experience? Because when your team understands how their role impacts the customer experience and how their role impacts the other people that they work with, I'm telling you, production increases, creativity increases, innovation increases, employee engagement increases, job satisfaction increases. And then once all of those things happen, revenue will follow. That's how it works. Here's the question of the week. When you're sitting in your role, ask yourself this: who needs to know what I do and how I do it to make their job easier? It's a tricky question. The question is how and who you impact other roles in your organization. Because once you understand that, you might find some great opportunities for better communication in your company. So if any of this topic resonated with you and you see it relating to your organization or your role in itself, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you. You can reach me at lisa@rebelgirlmarketing.com. That's a wrap for this week's episode of the Pitch to Purchase podcast. The next episode, I'm going to be interviewing Dave Melinda, who is a sales training coach. And the great thing about Dave is that he sees it from the sales perspective, but also the leadership perspective. Thank you so much for joining me in this episode of the Pitch to Purchase podcast. I am your host, Lisa Raebel. And you know what? It's time to raise the bar and maybe just a little hell. Cheers.